Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and your host. In this special edition of Project HR, you're going to get only the very best our guests had to offer as we celebrate our first year. Listen closely to the takeaways and most interesting moments. Here we go with part 2 of the best of Project HR.
And in today's episode, we'll be talking about something that none of us, either on the HR side or the LR side, like to think about. And that's the very real potential for sudden staff shortages. When an event happens, like a labor strike or, an unexpected pandemic that sends most of the country home, these kinds of things can absolutely decimate your labor force. As a leader, how can you ensure that productivity remains even when your staff does not? You do it by creating a contingency plan. And we've invited Michelle Vincent from Maddie to talk with us today about how to set up a contingency plan for your own organization.
This is obviously an unprecedented situation, one that most companies were not prepared for. And I think this is going to change, obviously, so much for businesses moving forward. And hopefully, we can take what we've learned from this process and this experience and be better prepared in the future. Larger companies have more at risk and they have more resources to dedicate towards contingency planning. But even the larger corporations that maybe had pandemic and influenza contingency plans in place already, they weren't fully prepared for what's happening right now. It also depends a little bit on the industry that the business is in. There are many regulatory agencies that require certain levels of preparedness from companies.
Well, in your opinion, should contingency plans cover strictly staffing issues, or should they cover other potential disruptions as well, like equipment failures or disasters?
A contingency plan should include any potential risks that could disrupt business operations. So that's typically man-made disasters, natural disasters, cyber attacks. That can even include, political change and unrest or labor disputes, obviously. So what should be included in a comprehensive contingency plan really is going to depend upon the industry, the business type, and even the geographical location of a business.
According to a recent SHRM report, 92% of employees surveyed said that benefits are important to their overall job satisfaction. You simply can't ignore the competitive impact of providing employees with the best benefits package possible. What's an HR professional to do? Find the best benefits options they can find for the lowest possible price. It's a job that legitimately leaves everyone dreading the lead up to open enrollment. That's why today we'll be talking with Jennifer Pereira, the CEO of Our Benefits Coach, an employee benefits agency dedicated to helping communicate and educate employees on all that their companies do for them. Coach Jen, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So we know that our benefits packages can really make or break a company and a job candidate's eyes. What are employees looking for in a benefits package today?
Yes, employees, like you said, are looking to spend as little as possible out of their pocket. So often you'll hear them say, I have benefits, but I can't afford to use them. So not only are they looking for plans that they can afford to actually pay for, but then the out-of-pocket expenses that the employees incur, they're looking for ways to close that gap as well. So they want coverage, but they can't afford all of the out-of-pocket expenses. So the lower we can keep that for the employees, the much happier they are.
In your opinion, what are the must-have benefits that a company needs to offer to remain both compliant and competitive?
So what's funny is a lot of companies will offer medical insurance and then they'll just leave it there and they'll say that they're all good. The number one requested benefit from employees besides medical is dental insurance. So dental insurance is very important. The second one is a short-term disability policy.
We'll be addressing an element of that AI-filled future that we haven't yet directly discussed, and that's its impact on not only tasks, but jobs. The fear that AI will eliminate jobs in the future isn't just techno-fear talking. It's tomorrow's reality. But happily, it's something we can begin to prepare for. And joining us today is Michael Lotito. Michael is a shareholder with the law firm of Littler Mendelson, and he is the co-chair of Littler's Workplace Policy Institute. And he's also the co-founder of the Emma Coalition, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization designed to help businesses prepare for future technological job disruption. That is so fascinating, talking about the robots potentially, I guess, taking over where a healthcare worker would be, because honestly, for the first time ever, people have been concerned that robots could take their jobs. But right now, it seems like it would be such a nice relief so that people wouldn't have to be exposed to a deadly virus.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly correct. And, that this automation revolution that we're going through does have a fear factor that goes with it. And we'll talk
Sure.
about that, some of the remedies to it. But there's also a lot of positives. I mean, you always think about, take, for example, a police officer. Would you rather have a police officer go into a backpack that's been left behind where people are fearful that there's a bomb in it? Or would you rather have a robot do it? Right? I mean, total no
Yeah,
brainer.
there's no
Right?
question.
Intensifying people's awareness that personal interaction is not necessarily the best thing to do from a productivity standpoint, from a health standpoint.
Right.
And the AI perspective is, we need data in order to make better predictions. We're going to need data with respect to the pandemic situation to defend the inevitable lawsuits.
Joining us today is Bob Oberstein. Bob has worked on both sides of the labor relations table, both in the private and public sectors. As an educator, he developed and administered the Labor Management Relations Program at Ottawa University, and he is now resurrecting his practice as an arbitrator, mediator, facilitator, and investigator. Bob, we are so glad you're here to talk to us today.
Thank you.
What other changes have impacted the way we look at social media policies?
The most glaring change is obviously what I've mentioned already, which is COVID-19, because now we have an extraordinary amount of work being done via social media of all kinds. Prior to that, I would have had to have said that the biggest change was in the National Labor Relations Act and union organizing efforts via social media. I need to be clear here. That doesn't have to be necessarily by a union approaching people through social media, but I'm talking here about employee to employee conversations, because that is also protected activity under the Act. And the fact is, the laws have not changed. It's just the medium that's changed, because a lot of companies, if you picked up their policy today, would say employees are not supposed to be discourteous to each other, or employees must always make sure that they hold certain information as confidential. Well, that's not necessarily true when it's employee to employee conversations under Section 7. We bring people on board and we teach them a lot about Title VII and sexual harassment and other kinds of discrimination. We have no trouble telling them what the law is. But when it comes to their rights under other laws, such as the National Labor Relations Act, we don't want to let them know what their rights are. And that creates a problem later on down the road, because who comes in and tells them their rights? Too often, it's the union, and now management is playing catch up.
We'll be talking about change and leading change in your organization. We are taping this episode as COVID-19 is disrupting every aspect of our working lives. And as we look to the future, for many, it can be hard to even imagine what it will be like when things get back to normal. Our guest today has some very definite opinions about normalizing the abnormal, as well as about change management post-COVID-19. Dr. Mark Rogers is the founder and CEO of Insights Without Borders, a global management consultancy firm. He's also the author of Transforming Change Management, Change or Be Changed, Disrupt or Be Disrupted. So you're saying that as leaders to prepare their teams for what's coming, whatever that is, that they can lead in vulnerability and kind of accept corporately that you can't control the uncontrollable, essentially.
This is an area that a lot of leadership, I think, they push back from. They sort of see this as this touchy-feely, this is your world. No, this is your prime opportunity in leadership where you guys are going to and women are going to have to come together, and you're going to have to talk about, our people are scared. Our people don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. We don't have the answers. Are we going to full remote working cultural environments? Are production lines going to be, fully automated? Doesn't get exposed to the COVID-19. We don't have to shut the whole plant down. Well, if we do that, what happens to the people that are not going to have those jobs now? These difficult conversations, this kind of future thinking proactively is really scary.
It is.
And if you don't have an emotional sensitivity, or an IQ to that, they're going to have to start getting that, because that's going to be part of the job description going forward.
That was great advice on organizational change post-COVID from Dr. Mark Rogers. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
Thanks to this week's Project HR sponsor, LaborWise Leadership. LaborWise Leadership provides your frontline leaders with the knowledge they need to help you avoid third-party interference in your business. With this powerful online course, you'll teach your leaders how to create greater engagement while remaining union-free. Get your free trial at projectionsinc.com/LaborWise.
Up next, we'll talk about the rising momentum of corporate social responsibility with Susan McPherson. You're listening to the best of Project HR.
The concepts of corporate social responsibility and sustainability are nothing new. They've been a part of our working landscape since the mid-20th century. But in recent years, these initiatives have quickly gained momentum in response, in part, to the acceleration of climate change and other crises across the globe. What was once just a nice thing to do has become something that has a much greater potential for critical impact. Today, we are joined by Susan McPherson. Susan is a corporate responsibility expert, and she is the founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, a communications consultancy focusing on the intersection between brands and social impact.
A company must do more than seek strong profit margins for its success. Being socially responsible is part of survival in today's economy. It's going to allow you and to help you have employees that want to stay with you. It's going to bring you customers that perhaps wouldn't have come to you. And it's going to help your brand be one that people trust and admire and respect. The 4 types of corporate responsibility are a company's philanthropic efforts, environmental, conservation. Let's put back more than we take from our one and only planet Earth. Company diversity, inclusion, and labor practices. And I can guarantee you that is going to step up at an increasingly fast pace.
Yeah.
And then obviously your community involvement. And I see that as how are you getting your employees involved in this greater mission, whether it be volunteering, whether it be sharing on their platforms, because we know today everyone has their own means from which to share and to sadly shame, but also galvanize their friends and fans and families.
We're taking on problem solving. We all face problems on the job as well as in our personal lives, and we do come up with solutions. Sometimes those solutions even work. But have you ever asked yourself if we could be doing this better? Where did we learn how to solve problems anyway? And is it possible that we might improve outcomes with a different approach? According to today's guest, our biggest challenge might not be in finding better solutions, but rather in better defining the problems we face. Today, we are joined by Thomas Weddle-Weddelsborg. He is a globally recognized expert on innovation and problem solving and author of a brand new book titled, What's Your Problem? To Solve Your Toughest Problems, Change the Problems You Solve. The book uses a lot of real-world examples that really make the concepts come alive. Seriously, for those listening, prepare for stories about shelter dogs, shuffleboard playing hipsters, and even Stephen Hawking. Can you share with us about that problem, the slow elevator problem?
Absolutely, and it's the single best way of explaining what reframing is rapidly. You imagine that you are the owner of an office building and that your tenants are complaining about the speed of the elevator. Now, what most people do in that situation is kind of to take the problem for granted, and then they end up brainstorming for ways to make the elevator faster. What building managers do in the real world, there's something else they often try, and that is to put up a mirror next to the elevators. Because, of course, what happens is people arrive, they're busy, but then they look up and see their own face, and they fall endlessly in love, and they forget something. It's just an encapsulation of that core idea that sometimes you're better off not solving the problem that's put in front of you, but instead going in and trying to look for a different interpretation or different framing of it. The mirror doesn't make the elevator faster. The mirror distracts people from the fact that they're waiting.
Whatever happened to civility? Americans have a deep concern about the state of civility in our nation. Their results show that the vast majority of Americans, 93%, identify our lack of civility as a problem, and 68% classify it as a major problem. Incivility can run rampant through workplaces, impacting employee health and wellness, threatening corporate liability, and yes, damaging a company's profitability. Whatever happened to civility, and how can we improve it in our workplace? Today, we are joined by Vanessa G. Nelson. Vanessa is the president of Expert Human Resources, an HR consultancy focusing on improving an organization's operational performance as well as their bottom lines. She is also the author of 101 Costly HR Mistakes and How to Fix Them Before It's Too Late.
Well, in my view, I believe that over time, people have just become less civil. And I believe it happened just like a little bit at a time, where small things began to be acceptable. Somebody in the workplace may drop a profane word. And at first, people might gasp and say, I can't believe they said it. But then they turn around and laugh about it, and the words became more and more acceptable. And then you have a profanity-laced workplace. Or, a little rudeness here and there, a little disrespect, a little gossip, a little making fun of a coworker, and then it crosses the line and it becomes an uncivil situation.
Do you think in those terms of what you just said, like, for example, with profanity, do you think it's just a generalized fear of people pleasing, like not wanting to speak up?
Absolutely. I just believe people want to be accepted, so they adapt to those behaviors.
We'll be talking about one of the most basic functions of an HR team, but one whose practices are wildly out of date. But honestly, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who disagrees with that. Of course, we are talking about recruiting. And while technology has added some nuance to the processes that we've been following for 50 plus years, it's definitely a time for all of us to re-examine how we go about hiring. We are joined today by Steve Lowiz. Steve is the founder and CEO of Qualigence International, a talent solutions provider. And he is also the author of Recruiting Sucks, but it doesn't have to. Breaking through the myths that got us here. Steve, we are so happy to have you here with us.
Glad to be here, Beth. Thank you.
So tell me, why does recruiting suck?
I think there's two reasons recruiting sucks. And one is it's focused often on the wrong things. And then the second piece is there's very little education around what recruiting really is. It's like anybody can do it by just picking up the phone or using LinkedIn or what have you. And there's no thought behind it at times. So I think there's two big issues as to why recruiting sucks.
If the recruitment systems are so broken, why are we still using them, do you think?
Well, I use myself as an example, right? So I'm probably 20 pounds overweight, give or take, depending on who you ask, right?
Okay.
Why don't I lose weight, right? I've tried. It's kind of a habit thing, right?
Yeah.
We're so used to doing it the way we've done it, even though it generally doesn't produce the right results. I know when I had ice cream last night, it was not good for me, but I continued to do it anyways.
Yeah, you're aware of the habit. It doesn't mean that awareness is going to bring about any change. You just know that it exists.
That's the issue. That's knowing and doing, you and I both know, are not the same thing. They're
really not. And I'm so excited because today's episode is the first in our Best Practices in Employee Relations series. We'll interview movers and shakers at companies you know and love. In this episode, we are joined by Stephanie Miller. Stephanie is the Director of Employee Relations for Lowe's. This multiple award-winning home improvement retailer has received the acknowledgments of Military-Friendly Employer, America's Most Loved Brands. They landed number 9 on Forbes' list of most engaged companies, and in 2020 was listed as one of the best places to work for LGBTQ equality with the Human Rights Campaign Foundation.
The last thing that I think we focus on with respect to our ER philosophy is making sure that we are supporting and improving upon the relationships that are building between our people leaders and our associates. And so the things that we offer our people leaders in terms of maybe constant reminders, or maybe it's, information for the first time, are things like, how do you foster open communication with your people? How do you make sure that you're doing it timely? In other words, if we have a new company initiative that's rolling out, how do we make sure that we time it correctly in terms of bringing our associates in the fold on that journey so that they understand the why behind we're doing it? And then making sure that we're just constantly and in many, many different methods or modes of communication connecting with our associates. If they know where to go internally with their concerns, we've got a pretty good shot of addressing them, and then our associates aren't going to feel like they need to take them outside of our organization to be handled.
With leaders like Stephanie, Lowe's has all the makings of a respectful workplace, as does our next sponsor's harassment e-learning program. Take a listen. We'll be back in less than 60 seconds. You're listening to the best of Project HR.
No one likes dealing with a crisis, but there are certain things we can prevent, and harassment in the workplace is one of them. Online harassment prevention training is mandated in a number of states. Do you know your current requirements? Download a comprehensive state-by-state guide to the legal requirements at therespectfulworkplace.net. And while you're there, check out the Respectful Workplace Harassment Prevention e-learning for your employees and leaders. It's compliant in all 50 states and so easy to deploy you can have it up and running today. Check it out at therespectfulworkplace.net. Recruitment in general can be quite a challenge. And if you're looking for specific skills and talents, that can make the search exponentially more difficult. What's more, when hiring for a role that directly impacts highly sensitive areas of the business, such as labor relations, well, that just adds a whole new level of complexity. When that happens, you need to bring in the experts. And that's why today we are joined by Kate Jackson with Serrano Search, an executive search firm dedicated to labor relations related recruitment. In your experience as a recruiter, what are you looking for in a labor relations candidate?
Individuals that were responsible for the strategy of labor relations within the organization, individuals that know how to interpret a collective bargaining agreement, how to manage grievances, how to deal with arbitrations, how to manage union campaigns, how to train management, how to build relationships with union leadership. So that's broadly, but I will say each client has a very specific need and it can vary. So it's very important that as a recruiter, you really understand what the roles and responsibilities are, because it can change from organization to organization and job to job. Oh, can I add one more thing too?
Oh, yes, of course.
So the other day I did send out a communication and asking our labor relations network what they felt were the skill sets needed to be successful as a labor relations professional.
Ooh, I'd love to hear that.
And so I thought it was great because it came straight from people that do this job day in and day out. So it was integrity, active listening skills, emotional intelligence, empathy, thick skin, because it is a contact sport, salesmanship, ability to build and maintain professional relationships on both sides of the table, and patience and a strong sense of humor.
And today we'll be talking about the value of the employee voice, and more specifically about how leaders can encourage employees to speak up and become micro-innovators, problem solvers, and customer advocates for their organizations. Joining us today to talk about all of this and more are Karen Hurt and David Dye of management consulting firm Let's Grow Leaders and authors of Courageous Cultures. Well, in the introduction, we mentioned micro-innovators. What are these roles and why are they so beneficial to an organization?
Sure. Let's start with the micro-innovator. So we are not primarily talking about blue ocean strategy, where you come up with the next iPhone, the kind of these, game-changing, world-making innovations, although courageous cultures can certainly contribute and make those happen. A micro innovation is the day-to-day enhancement. It's the improvement by evolution rather than revolution that happens in teams and organizations. And so you think about a leader that spends a year trying to find a big blue ocean strategy, somewhere to go, versus another leader with a team full of people, every one of whom is contributing a micro innovation every day for 365 days, and the massive amount of growth, improvement, and forward movement in that latter team. And so micro innovations are those, they're improvements in the customer experience, could be a process efficiency, anything that's affecting the business, the employer customer experience in a positive way.
So, for example, a leader said, you know what, instead, every meeting that was an hour when we were in person is now going to move to 45 minutes in our virtual environment. Just a really small little thing. But if everyone on your team is coming up with one small little thing, that's what really can add up to much more, productivity.
We'll be focusing on the challenges of leading in an uncertain world. A world that, admittedly, has become exceptionally uncertain in 2020 and will likely remain that way in the coming months. That's why we've asked Brandon Williams of LeadTac to join us today. As a United States Air Force F-15E fighter pilot and officer, he is well-versed in leading diverse teams through challenging times. And now he uses that knowledge to develop and inspire corporate leadership, specifically through the use of situational awareness.
Humans, we're not designed for that. We're not designed really to thrive in complexity. I mean, think about it. That's why we get frustrated when we think about everything we have to do this week or this day or this month, this year, this quarter. And it's hard to grasp that. It's hard to think strategically. We have to do it. So that we're not wired for that. So when you think about leadership, though, you have to really tap in to the tactical aspect, those human factors. What does complexity do to humans? Like I said, we're not designed for it. It drives human error. And situational awareness leadership, the whole model we teach at LeadTac, the whole idea of that is how we as leaders help mitigate that human error. Yeah, it's not a flying an F-15 or it's not a combat environment necessarily, a military unit, but there's complexity in our world. I mean, think about it. We're even non-COVID environment where we were already going to highly remote teams. That itself is just a huge challenge in itself. Ever-changing marketplaces, things are moving faster, big data, cloud computing, trying to keep up with the competition. And now you throw in a pandemic. I mean, holy complexity, Batman.
Yeah.
So,
here comes Brandon now with able to help us with, this is like high level complexity here.
So how do we lead with that? How do we mitigate human errors in our people?
Recent studies have shown that approximately half of all senior outside hires fail within 18 months in a new position. And approximately half of all hourly workers leave new jobs within the first 120 days. All of which goes to say that just finding the perfect fit isn't enough. You've also got to take steps to keep them enthusiastic and engaged. That process starts with one of the most important elements of the new hire experience, onboarding. To tell us how we can do just that is Anya Zojcheska, the Human Resources and Employee Happiness Manager at TalentLift.
Most companies don't give onboarding an ample amount of time. The onboarding process in most companies is definitely way too short. This is because most companies still have just orientation on employees' first day instead of the whole onboarding process. And most companies that have a real onboarding process end it way too quickly. There was a very interesting survey Career Builder did recently. It was a comprehensive study of onboarding conducted on different companies in different industries and of different sizes. And what this research found is that 2/3 of hiring managers and HR professionals spend less than a month onboarding new employees.
Oh.
Yeah, according to this research, only 1 in 4 employers, that is 25%, reported that their company onboarding process takes a day or less. 26% of companies have an onboarding program that lasts a week, and 21% of companies said that their onboarding process takes place over a course of a month. More and more research is suggesting that companies should be extending onboarding to a full year.
It's an unfortunate fact that most of us, to some degree or another, have had to deal with toxicity in the workplace. In fact, toxic workplaces are a primary reason workers leave their jobs, and leadership is often held responsible for its presence. So what do we mean when we talk about toxicity, and how can leaders head it off in their own workplaces? Today's guest has written what he calls a survival guide for toxic workplaces and offers a bold new approach to addressing these issues. Here to talk about his book, The Arsonist in the Office, Fireproofing Your Life Against Toxic Coworkers, Bosses, Employees, and Cultures, let's welcome Pete Havel.
Maybe when somebody speaks up and says, hey, I found this issue that popped up, I think it's a real problem. It may be a safety issue. It may be some financial, any of those types of things. Or you may have somebody that raises their hand, offers their perspective, and an insecure person above them says, I'm not going to let that person get any further within the company on my watch. So it can be those types of things. It can be yelling and shouting. It can be silence. And that probably sounds contradictory, but you find in so many toxic environments, and we've probably all been there on this, when people have learned very quickly that their perspectives are not respected, that you offer constructive criticism, or you may be doing something to help out the team, and it's just not encouraged. So at the end of that meeting, when your manager says, all right, does anybody have any questions or want to say anything? The room is silent, because people have learned quickly, you know what? Nobody cares about what I have to say. Or they've seen what's happening around the organization and they just mentally check out and they're no longer invested.
Great stuff from Pete Havel. Check out his new book, The Arsonist in the Office. Now, Projections wants to help you find out if your company is vulnerable to union organizing with a 5-minute assessment. Take a listen. Is your company at risk for a union organizing attempt? The NLRB's numbers are in, and here's what they reveal. The number of union certification elections has roughly doubled every single month since the pandemic hit in April. Similarly, the number of employees eligible to vote in a certification election doubled in May, doubled again in June, and doubled again in July. If you look at year-over-year stats, the rate at which unions won certification went from just 55% in June of 2019 to 76% in June of 2020. Finally, in July, the total number of employees eligible to vote surpassed levels for the same month of 2019. But these stats don't mean a lot if you don't know where you stand. Projections wants you to find out if your company is vulnerable now with a free online audit. We'll dig into your culture, safety, and other internal factors, as well as external factors like a local presence. To do your own 5-minute assessment, go to bit.ly/organizing-risk. That's bit.ly/organizing-risk. Identify and address your challenges to avoid becoming part of the statistics. What can happen if your company doesn't have an alternative dispute resolution process? A lot, apparently, as we find out with our next guest, Ross Runkle. You're listening to the best of Project HR. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and today we're going to be talking about conflict. There are few controversies that can be more damaging to a business than a dispute with an employee, and if that employee happens to be a key executive, the impact of that dispute can be even worse. One study even claimed that U.S. companies face a nearly 12% chance of being hit with an employment lawsuit, and that those lawsuits result in defense and settlement costs of, on average, about $125,000 per case. So clearly, the best scenario would be to avoid these kinds of disputes altogether. But when that doesn't happen, companies often turn to arbitration or mediation to help resolve those disputes and mitigate their impact. That's why we've asked Ross Runkle to join us for this episode. Ross has spent the better part of his career serving as an independent labor and employment arbitrator and mediator.
Mediation, very different, because the mediator doesn't have any authority to make a decision. The mediator's job is to come in and help the parties to negotiate themselves to reach their own agreement, something that the parties themselves want to do, like the arbitrator would tell them what to do. The mediator doesn't do that. And then, of course, negotiation, which is what resolves most disputes, is just two people face to face trying to work out a resolution. These are all voluntary and private processes except for litigation.
So can a company basically mandate arbitration?
What people call mandatory arbitration, keeping in mind that arbitration is a voluntary process. But what happens is that an employee will sign an agreement, maybe when they're hired or later on, an agreement to arbitrate disputes that might arise in the future. People in the business call it as a pre-dispute arbitration agreement. So then if a dispute arises later on, a court's going to enforce that agreement to arbitrate. So at that point, the arbitration actually is mandatory. But it's mandatory only because the employee originally agreed to it.
Right. And today we're discussing an 8-letter word that might as well be a 4-letter word, judging by the way it makes most of us feel. I'm talking about feedback. And while it's a critical part of corporate improvement and performance, the process brings with it a lot of baggage for everyone involved. Can we fix the feedback process and make it a more productive and less stressful effort? Our guest today certainly believes we can. Joining us today is Tamra Chandler, partner and principal at EY, and author of Feedback and Other Dirty Words, Why We Fear It, How to Fix It. We're so happy you're here, Tamra.
Oh, thank you. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks, Jennifer. We really, really struggle with this word. I like to say feedback has a horrible brand. Like the word itself has a horrible brand. I mean, most people, if you even say the word feedback, they put this phantom word negative in front of it, right? It means something that's coming at me that's going to hurt, that's going to be painful, that's maybe not fair. So we really have to take a step back and redefine this whole word because it is really has a bad brand.
How do you think that's happened? How has feedback gotten such a bad rap?
I think it starts like I joke, it starts at the playground. It starts with the conversations you had with your siblings, right? We all sort of learn feedback in this not very positive way. I also think in Western cultures, we have this belief that is completely not true, but we sort of believe that if I'm going to make you better, Jennifer, the best way I should do that is tell you all the things you're doing wrong. And you'll emerge from that a better person. But
but
that
I'm not like you
actually,
much.
you won't like me much and you won't trust me anymore.
Right.
And you won't in the end be a better person. So we have a lot of false beliefs about feedback. We connect to are the negative things. So when we think about feedback, that's why we tend to think about, we say we're positively negative. We think about the negative.
Now, of course, here on Project HR, we talk a lot about encouraging the maintenance of a positive, collaborative workplace. It's one of HR's primary goals. But sometimes that goal can be tough to achieve, and one of the most challenging times for maintaining that positivity can be during a heated political campaign. Not long from now, the U.S. will face one of the most divisive presidential elections in its history. And despite the fact that many Americans are now working from home, toxic behavior, including campaign rhetoric, can still make its way into your workspaces, deeply impacting your team's current and future harmony and productivity. What can we do as leaders and HR professionals to head off this damage? Today, we're joined by Abigail Johnson-Hess, a careers reporter with CNBC Make It, who has written on this very topic, and she's going to help us better understand what's at stake.
I've been following these studies and surveys on the subject of politics in the workplace for over a year now, right, as we were kind of ramping up towards November 2020. Back in November 2019, a survey from the Society of Human Resources Management found that 42% of U.S. employees say they have personally experienced a political disagreement at work. A February 2020 Glassdoor poll found that 57% of workers say they've talked about politics while on the job. And most recently, a survey from Gartner found that 78% of people talk about politics at work, and 47% of people say that the 2020 presidential election has impacted their ability to get work done. So steadily, we've seen that these conversations are happening at work. And, now we're starting to see that it's starting to have an impact on people's productivity, on the way they work, on the quality of their work, things like that.
Most people think it's inappropriate to talk about politics at work, but then we just can't stop ourselves. And so it's interesting to me. 2020 has been just one hit after another. We're all stressed from, social unrest to fires and hurricanes, to murder hornets. The truth is, if we don't laugh, we cry. So how much has this problematic year fed into the political divide that we're seeing in work?
Well, I think you're definitely right. Workers have been thrown a lot to deal with this year. I think the way that it's fed into the way people have political conversations is I think people have begun to become desensitized to some really difficult subjects, right?
Now, years ago, you started a new job, and on your very first day, you were handed a flurry of papers to sign and a bound book, or at least a hefty pamphlet, your employee handbook. The handbook was a document that outlined the basics of your work with the company, from benefits to holidays to general personnel policies. And as an employee, it was your go-to for company questions. And it was typically the driest read ever. But no more. Today's employee handbooks look very different than they did back then. In fact, they're often not even books, and they're no longer just a list of rules and benefits. Modern handbooks serve as no less than a comprehensive introduction to a company's culture. And if your company hasn't updated its employee handbook in a while, you're going to want to listen to this episode. Our guest today is Ryan Golden, reporter with HR Dive, which provides in-depth journalism and insight into the most impactful news and trends shaping human resources.
One of the biggest pieces of advice I've heard from my employment attorney sources has been that if you have an employee handbook, you should probably be updating it at least once per year to reflect changes in state law, federal law, local law, because as we've seen in the past few years, employment law has shifted considerably on all these levels.
So your legal context, so they recommend an annual look at it. Should the attorney be involved at that point? Or is that just something that you should do internally and kind of do an audit of the handbook? Or should they hand it over to their labor and employment attorney to make sure that they're fully updated?
Yeah, I think the easiest answer to that question is just yes. Involve your compliance team at sort of every step of the way in updating your handbook. Over and over again, I've heard employment attorneys in any employment law issue, you've got to get your compliance people involved, your leadership team involved. And as you make those changes, make sure you communicate them to your workforce in a lot of different ways, not just through email, but through electronic updates, through apps if you need to, through your internal intranet, through management. There are a lot of ways to communicate those changes.
Now, as leaders today, leaders of people, leaders of companies, and of communities, we know that over the past year, change has rapidly been thrust upon us at an unheard rate. And it's not that there's a lack of information out there. In fact, there's so much information available to all of us, I'd say we're in a state of decision fatigue. In short, we're stuck. Information overload creates a paralysis by analysis, and that sense of overwhelm can leave us with an inability to pivot when we need to most. Happily, this is a situation that can be overcome. And today, we're joined by the man who wrote the book on how to do just that. Craig Lemasters is here. He is CEO of GXG Consultancy and the author of Unstuck: How to Unlock and Activate the Wisdom of Others. So what are the symptoms that indicate that a leader or a team is in fact stuck?
Yeah, so where this idea of stuck unstuck applies the most, Jennifer, is when we're doing new things, or as I say, new stuff. So if I stick with that as the destination, the first symptom of stuck is we struggle defining the destination. I think there's usually 2 or 3 or more paths to get to the destination. So when I see a leader struggling with, what actually is that? It means we haven't picked a destination, really. And that's one symptom. The other is, and we drew this picture in the book called Circle of Stuck, but when we tend to do new stuff, it usually starts with a meeting. Pretty standard. The challenge is in the Circle of Stuck is we have the meeting, it's usually a decent sized group of people, and then we start to carbon copy and blind carbon copy people on that, and then the group grows. And it gets bigger and bigger. And then people that weren't in the meeting get upset. So we have to have a second meeting and a third meeting. And I had a CEO actually interrupt me one time telling the story and said, "Hey, I think I have a record for you." He said, "Well, I just saw an email with 347 CCs."
Holy cow.
Yeah, that's kind of what I said. And I'm like, wow, that is a record. And he said, I kind of got aggravated, but I never thought of it as we might be stuck.
Might be stuck. Sounds like the definition of stuck. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the best of Project HR.
Are you new to labor relations or working in HR? And ta-da! Now need labor relations skills? Today's sponsor, Union Proof Certification, has got you covered. Union Proof Certification is a comprehensive online course in labor relations that will help you get the knowledge you need to understand what's at stake, the language used by unions and attorneys, the resources available for assistance, and how you can turn a potentially frightening situation into a positive one. You can learn more at unionproof.com/certification. Learn years of labor relations knowledge at your own pace and earn 24 SHRM or HRCI credits at the same time.
Up next, we had a lot of fun with Jeff Novak and his 10 years of FMLA insights, as well as his impromptu singing. You're listening to the best of Project HR. The Family Medical Leave Act was signed into law. A study conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management found that nearly 2/3 of HR professionals had experienced problems in administering the FMLA. It's no surprise, then, that employers have looked online for guidance regarding this complex rule, scouring everything from government websites to seeking out helpful blogs, such as the highly successful blog written by today's guest, Jeff Novak. Jeff is a shareholder with Littler Mendelson, and in 2020, his blog, FMLA Insights, celebrated its 10th year, a landmark for any publication. Jeff, I wanted to congratulate you on hitting that decade mark, and thank you for joining us today on Project HR.
Thanks, Jen. Great to be here.
Now, in that post, you told some stories on some employees behaving badly. I would love it if you would share a couple of those memorable stories with us.
Well, when I think of my favorite posts, there's the craziest things happen at the workplace, and that's so true in the world of FMLA. So this is employee behaving badly, where she gets a bad review, she gets written up, she gets disciplined. The next day, she seeks FMLA leave. Not uncommon. An employee gets disciplined, and the next day they take a medical leave. Takes a leave of absence for several weeks of time, can't come back to work, can't do anything as far as her doctor is concerned. Then she is spotted attending a Beyonce concert while she's on medical leave. But not only that, she's attending the concert in the employer's suite.
It's a perk, it's a benefit.
And of course, that's going to kind of raise the attention of the supervisor, who then asks, "Well, hold on a second. You're telling me that you can't be at work right now because of this condition, but yet, can you help me understand how you ended up in the employer's suite at the Beyonce concert?" It's kind of stuff like this that you almost can't make up.
So one last thing, Jeff, a little bird told me that you often sing songs in your webinars. I was wondering if you would share with us an a cappella stanza or two of your favorite webinar songs.
The last couple of years, I've kind of stuck with "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen" by the Bare Naked Ladies at Christmas time.
Yep.
And I've changed the song over the years to "Oh Rest Ye FMLA Misusers." This may shatter the windows of
I'm ready.
at the studio.
Lay it on me.
All right. I woke up at 4:30 with a scratched cornea. It was better than last week. I swore I had a hernia. Oh, what excuse I could concoct to avoid my overtime. Oh, tidings of FMLA, FMLA. Oh, tidings of FMLA. That's all you're going to get.
Yay. Now, innovation is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it should. It is, or it should be, a critical part of any business. But to really make an impact, innovation has to become a habit, and it has to be fully integrated into your corporate culture. For many, developing a culture of innovation can be a challenge. Joining us today is Natalie Pinchot. She is the Director of Learning at management consulting firm InnoSight, and she is one of the authors of Eat, Sleep, Innovate: How to Make Creativity an Everyday Habit Inside Your Organization. So one of the cornerstones of the Eat, Sleep, Innovate program is the use of beans. So pro tip to our audience, that's not the kind that comes in a can. Can you tell us what beans are?
Yes, BEANS stands for Behavior Enablers, Artifacts, and Nudges. And a behavior enabler is some type of direct way to change behavior. That might be a process or a checklist or a coach, for example. The artifacts and nudges are the indirect ways to encourage that behavior. And those might be things that you don't even notice are really happening. It could be some type of visual cue that sits in a meeting room, or more recently, I've seen people with custom Zoom backgrounds to remind them of what they need to be doing. And it's a fun acronym and a memorable one.
For sure. Can you give us some examples of your favorite beans?
I sure can. So as I think about being customer obsessed, something we just talked about, one that I really love is the future press release. This is something that Amazon uses to look at what is the desired outcome from the customer's perspective. So writing a press release in the future can be very motivating to then say, we're doing all this work and it's going towards this ultimate outcome of how we're going to serve our customers. And they can be kind of fun to write and just an easier way to engage people than a boring list of objectives, let's say.
Yeah, that's a fantastic exercise. I love that. And I wanted to talk about the fact that in any given year, a company faces tremendous pressures that can test the ethics of individuals within the company, as well as the ethics of the organization as a whole. We're reminded of this fact almost on a daily basis, with ethical scandals at Uber, Wells Fargo, Volkswagen, Starbucks, Facebook, just to name a few. But integrity isn't just a concern for high-profile organizations. It's an issue for every organization. And if your company hasn't determined, developed, and communicated its unique code of ethics to its team and to the public at large, your company is missing a critical opportunity to bring out the best in yourselves, in your industry, and in your community. Today, I am so excited that we are joined by Rob Chestnut, Chief Ethics Officer with Airbnb and the author of Intentional Integrity: How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. Hi, Rob. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
You know, integrity is one of those words that a lot of people use without stopping to think about what it means. Yeah. So taking that inspiration, how do you define integrity?
Well, you're right. It's
You see it on those posters, right? Those with the pretty sunset and the lake and the lone
Right.
tree and the word integrity underneath, and nobody talks about it.
What is that?
Because it's an uncomfortable subject a little bit. I think leaders, they don't want to get into morality, right? They don't want, they almost feel like it's someone's personal business, And for me, integrity, the classic definition, doing the right thing even when no one's watching. The problem is the world's changed, and the world is always watching now. And so things that were swept under the rug, misdeeds, the lying, the cheating, the stealing, it's coming out. And the world's hearing about bad behavior by leaders and by companies now like never before.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Oraqua, host of Project HR. At the end of every podcast, we put our guests through a series of lightning round questions as we wrap up on part 2 of the best of Project HR. Here's a look back at the lightning round.
Not until you answer our lightning round questions. Are you ready for those?
Oh my goodness.
I guess so.
I am ready.
No, but go ahead anyway.
Pretzels or a chocolate chip cookie?
Toxic waste dumps or toxic relationships? The big cheese or the top dog? Sheldon Cooper or Hermione Granger, classic smiley face, or the laughing so hard I'm crying face? You choose the blue pill or the red. Ariana Grande and her problem, or Jay-Z and his 99 problems.
Sheryl Crow's Leaving Las Vegas or Leaving on a Jet Plane by Peter, Paul, and Mary?
Yeah.
I'll go cookie.
Toxic relationships, hands down.
The top dog.
Oof, that's a tough one. I'd say they're both bad.
I have to say Hermione, because she's aware of the emotions of others. She supports friends, and she often uses magic to help the greater good.
I'm surprised it's just limited to those two choices because my reputation is that of the emoji king.
It would be the red pill.
I'd say anybody with 99 problems, I have help. I would say Jay-Z.
Oh my gosh, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Every day, any day.
This was wonderful. Thanks again for this opportunity.
Is this the lightning round ambush? Go ahead, let's see what we can do.
What's the worst job interview question you've ever been asked?
Was I able to design my own job description?
What?
The interviewer said, "Oh, we thought you'd be older." What? Rude. I was like,
what's your favorite color? Like, what does it have anything to do?
I was like, that person just gave up that day, didn't they?
Right.
We want somebody who can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Well, if you find somebody who has all those qualifications, you should hire them.
Well, did you get that job?
No.
And it wasn't that there were bad questions. It was that there were no questions.
What?
He talked the entire time.
But I need all the color of the Crayolas I can to make sure my message is being heard the way I intended.
That is a first on this podcast. That's wonderful.
Was whether or not she was married.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's relevant.
Waiting 3.5 hours in order to be interviewed.
Do you have any other questions for me?
That's funny. Lightning round.
Pressure.
So tell me, what is your favorite thing about working?
And all of a sudden you could recognize in that group of people that the light has come on. And that is so cool.
Being able to help clients with practical, everyday issues, and in doing so to help them be fair to their employees.
Probably that you can upgrade people. Like it's so fulfilling to go in, give people a new tool, and see them start applying it, and that's very fulfilling.
There's never been 2 days that were exactly the same. And as one of my mentors said, it's the most fun you can legally have with all of your clothes on.
All right. Yeah, that works.
It's the feeling that you get when you've helped a company survive and thrive through a crisis situation.
Honestly, our clients are the best. It's never the same day twice at Projections. Every new project is a new adventure, and every client success is fantastic. I love helping companies connect with their employees.
I love HR. HR is my first love, and I just love being a part of a field that really focuses on making workplaces better for everyone.
Every single day, you get to see people making positive changes and seeing the results of that.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Be able to laugh at yourself.
Can't take yourself too seriously.
If somebody offers you an amazing opportunity, but you're not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it later.
Is to never just shut your brain off, except for when you're sleeping and napping.
Don't be afraid to stretch. The more you stretch, the more you get out of your comfort zone, the bigger your comfort zone gets.
My dad used to tell me the best advice he ever got was not to tug on Superman's cape, so I think that's pretty solid advice.
Nobody likes to work, but if you have to work, what brings you in every day so it's not work? Follow your passion.
If somebody is trying to help you, get out of their way and let them.
Just keep moving forward and keep fueling. And I think that's great triathlon advice, but it's even better life advice.
Don't assume anything.
Writing that down. Thank you.
Who or what inspires you?
Other than my mom?
Other than your mom.
A line from my mom: for those to whom much is given, much will be required.
I think this generation, Gen Z, are just super cool and motivated, but also really aware of society.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
It's somewhere between poetry and historical biographies. Just always reminds me that we can lead epic lives, and I think we can sometimes forget that in our day-to-day hamster wheel.
Writing that down sounds really good.
It would have to be my mother. She is and still remains my Murphy Brown.
Right now, my wife.
So is it fair to say my husband?
Yes! That's wonderful.
His quest to be better makes me want to be better.
I would point to our kids. Again, our kids are 25, 23, 21. We've watched them go through their different struggles and journeys, and it's just so cool. They're so different. It's amazing that they were raised by the same parents. It's just neat to see that as a dad.
I woke up at 4:30 with a scratched cornea. That's all you're going to get.
Yay! Well, I really appreciate that. In 3, 2, 1. And that's a wrap on part 2 of the Best of Project HR. Special thanks to all of our wonderful guests and also to our listeners. Remember, every week we take notes on the podcast, creating an episode companion. If you'd like to Remember that every week we do the hard work for you. We take the notes in the podcast, creating an episode companion. If you'd like to get the Best of Project HR companion, including links to every episode we mentioned, you can find it at Project... Okay, in 3, 2, 1. If you'd like to get the Best of Project HR One more time. 3, 2, 1. That's a wrap on part 1 of the Best of Project HR. Special thanks to all of our wonderful guests, and also thanks to our listeners. Remember that every week we do the work for you and take notes on the podcast, creating an episode companion. If you'd like to get the Best of Project HR companion, including links to every episode we mentioned, you can find it at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Would you like to be a guest on the next Project HR, or do you know someone that you'd like us to chat with? Feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. Finally, make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you're feeling it, drop us a line, leave us a review, or simply rate us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it for me for now. Let's make it a great day at work. If it sounds cheese, cut it off.